Thank you, Tanya, and thank all of you for coming tonight. So I want to start with a show of hands. How many of you, when you were a teenager, did something that was maybe a little dumb or dangerous, or had a friend who did a dumb or dangerous thing? Right. It's a pretty universal experience. The teen brain is impulsive. It thinks about that immediate reward right in front of it and not so much about the long-term consequences. But fortunately, by the time we're in our mid-20s, our brains mature, and we mostly survive our impulsive mistakes and grow up. But for some young people, those typical teenager mistakes can become lifelong barriers to success. For thousands of kids in Massachusetts, children as young as 7, their mistakes bring them into contact with our justice system. For kids who have thrown a piece of cake at another kid or taken someone's phone, they find themselves charged with assault and battery with a dangerous weapon or a felony theft. They end up out of school, locked up, and far worse off than they were before they hit our system. Less likely to graduate from high school, less likely to find a job, and more likely to commit a future crime. In other words, the system breaks the young people that enter it, making it impossible for them to get back onto the path to successful adulthood. So not only is the system not working well for the young people, it costs the rest of us a lot of money. The average annual cost to lock up a child in Massachusetts is $120,000. We spend close to $50 million every year locking up kids with low-level offenses. Compare that to the cost to educate a child in public school or to get a young person and their family the supportive services that they need to thrive. We do not have to put up with systems that work this way. That's why Citizens for Juvenile Justice exists. CFJJ advocates for a fair and effective system, one that helps young people grow up into responsible adults and invests in programs that actually work. Through statewide policy advocacy, we help thousands of kids every year. How do we do it? So, our small staff of 6 are passionate advocates for reform. We are lawyers, social workers, public health practitioners, and community organizers who know the issues and the young people. We identify the biggest and most problematic issues in the system, and then we lobby. We draft legislation, and we advocate at the State House, in the courts, and in our state agencies. How do we know what's going to have big impact and what will actually work better? We research. We dig into the data, and we talk to people. And through that research, we discover things. We've discovered that African American youth are 4 times as likely to be charged in court and 9 times as likely to be incarcerated as white youth in Massachusetts, often simply because they live in more heavily policed communities and schools. We've learned that half of the kids who are locked up in Massachusetts have educational disabilities. And most importantly, we've learned that community-based alternatives, things like restorative justice or in-home therapy or even sports, are cheaper and work better to prevent crime than what we're doing today. We share these kinds of findings with policymakers and with the public through data-driven reports, briefings, testimony, conferences, and constant outreach to the press. So, big systems change can't be done alone. We've built a coalition of nearly 50 organizations that are working for reform here in Massachusetts, and we helped co-found a national network of advocacy organizations that's now in 43 states. We also work with parents and young people, like Victor, who got into a fight with his stepbrother when he was 14 years old, and who testified at the State House about how that one incident prevented him from joining the National Guard. So far, we've had some really exciting success. We've kept and helped thousands of young people in the process. Over the past decade, we've reduced the number of kids who are locked up in Massachusetts by more than 50%. We've kept 10,000 young people out of unsafe adult jails and courts, and we've ended the practice of sentencing children to die in prison here in Massachusetts. But we're not done. The system still sends thousands of young people to jails when there are more effective, more developmentally appropriate options in their communities. And many, many young people still face lifelong barriers because of their juvenile records. In other words, the system isn't fixed yet, and that's why we need your help. Over the next 2 years, CFJJ will be advocating for alternatives to court to hold young people accountable in their communities. We'll launch a public-facing, web-based interactive project to educate people about how the juvenile justice system works and how it can do better. And we'll also reach out to researchers at universities to build our research and education capacity. Your investment in CFJJ, whether through support for one of our initiatives or through in-kind support, can help us make systems change faster and help thousands more kids. Massachusetts can be a model for the rest of the country. We are all more than the mistakes that we made as teenagers. All of you in this room, all of you who raised your hands earlier, went on to be leaders in business, in design, in engineering, community groups, and the young people who are caught up in our system today can be artists and entrepreneurs and community leaders and caretakers if we give them the chance to move beyond their mistakes. Citizens for Juvenile Justice would be honored to be the voice to create that future. Thank you.